Just before sunrise, when Buckingham Palace is usually silent enough to hear the guards shift their boots, something unusual happened. A matte black vehicle rolled out from a side gate rarely used. Its windows covered, its lights dimmed, its escort unusually tense. Royal guards stood straighter. A few even exchanged looks they weren't supposed to show. What could be important enough to move at dawn and secret enough to hide from the world? Because whatever was inside that vehicle didn't just leave the palace. It changed the royal story forever. Before we dive deeper into this dawn mystery, make sure to like the video so more people can discover these hidden royal moments. If you enjoy emotional, rare insights into the royal family, hit subscribe. It's free and helps the channel grow. And feel free to share this video with someone who loves the royals as much as you do. All right, let's step inside the story. Dawn had barely begun to paint the edges of the London sky when Buckingham Palace stirred in a way it wasn't meant to. Normally, the first movement happens quietly. Kitchen lights flickering on, a single guard stepping forward to begin the rotation, a soft hum from a maintenance cart behind the gardens. But this morning was different. Something shifted in the air, subtle but unmistakable, like a breath being held by the entire palace. Just after 4:47 a.m., when the city still felt half asleep, a side gate, one almost never used, clicked open. The hinges made a sound that echoed faintly across the courtyard, startling a nearby guard who was too well trained to actually show his surprise. Still, his eyes narrowed, following the movement as a matte black vehicle rolled forward. It wasn't the kind of vehicle the public usually sees associated with the royal family. No glossy finish, no polished chrome, no deep blue or emerald green coat that catches the dawn light. This one was quieter, heavier, built not for ceremony but for function. Its windows were heavily tinted. The engine, despite its size, purred too softly, and the royal guard escort walking beside it moved with an urgency that didn't match their usual ritual precision. Their steps were slightly faster, their shoulders a little tighter. Something was wrong, or very, very important. To the few guards stationed along the inner path, the message had been clear. Whatever was inside that vehicle was not to be noticed, yet also absolutely not to be ignored. One guard, Sergeant Harris, a man known for keeping his face carved in stone, felt a prickle at the back of his neck. He had served through countless transitions, ceremonies, departures, and arrivals. But something about this morning stood apart from all of them. The way the officers moved, the silence between commands, the early hour. It all felt like the palace was trying to hide the heartbeat of something enormous. He watched the vehicle glide across the courtyard, escorted by 4 armed guards whose expressions were unreadable, even for someone as observant as Harris. One of them, a tall officer with a tight jaw, briefly touched his earpiece. Not the sharp, efficient tap used in normal communication, but a slower, almost nervous adjustment. Harris caught it instantly. "Sir?" he whispered to the guard beside him, a younger soldier named Whitby. "Don't ask," Whitby muttered back. "We were told to stand absolutely still." "When were you told?" 2 minutes ago." 2 minutes ago? In the palace. Orders didn't arrive this late, unless something was unfolding live, moment by moment. Harris felt his heartbeat slow, then speed again. The vehicle turned slightly, moving toward the outer gate that connected the palace to the beginning of the mall. That gate had been cleared in advance. Unusual, given the hour, and even more unusual given that no public schedule mentioned any dawn departures today. Inside the palace, far beyond the view of the guards, the mood wasn't any calmer. King Charles had been awake since before 4 a.m., not because he chose to be, but because a knock on his door carried words that changed the pace of his entire morning. His staff wouldn't admit it, but their voices held something he rarely heard from them: worry. He had risen, dressed quickly, and walked down a corridor normally filled with echoing chatter. Now it was silent, tense, almost reverent. A few doors down, Prince William had received the same call. He'd been reviewing notes for an early briefing when the phone buzzed. The moment he heard the voice on the other end, he stood up so fast the chair hit the wall. Whatever was happening, he knew it wasn't routine. Kate had woken to find William's side of the bed empty. When she stepped into the hallway, wrapped in a soft robe, she noticed instantly that something in the palace had shifted. Staff stepped aside with more care than usual. Guards moved with a kind of protective instinct that doesn't appear unless the stakes are high. She whispered, "Is it serious?" William looked at her, and although he tried to hide his worry, she saw it instantly. "It's unexpected," he said, "and we need to act fast." Back outside, the mysterious vehicle had reached the center of the courtyard. A cluster of guards formed around it, not rigidly like a parade formation, but more like a shell, protective and watchful. Harris noticed one detail he couldn't shake. Each guard kept glancing not just outward, scanning for threats, but also toward the vehicle itself, as if the true danger or the true secret was inside. And then, for a split second, the vehicle's interior light flicked on. Maybe it was accidental. Maybe someone shifted in their seat, but it illuminated just enough for Harris to see a faint silhouette through the tinted glass. A shape, small, too small for a senior official, too still to be sleeping, too fragile for this level of security, unless it was someone unimaginably important. He blinked, breath caught. "A child?" he whispered without meaning to. Whitby didn't answer, but he heard it too, and he stiffened. The escorting officer shot a sharp glance their way, as if warning them not to let curiosity turn into speculation. The palace gates opened just wide enough for the vehicle to slide through. No flashing lights, no outriders, no ceremony, just a quiet departure at dawn, witnessed by guards who knew they weren't supposed to understand it, yet couldn't help sensing the weight of the moment. As the vehicle rolled onto the mall, the early morning mist swallowed a whole. The guards stood perfectly still, pretending the world hadn't just shifted under their feet. Inside the palace, King Charles stood near a window, watching the moment from a distance. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were clasped behind his back, gripping each other just a little too tightly. William joined him a moment later. "It's done," he said quietly. Charles nodded, but his voice was heavy. "Let's hope this changes things for the better." Kate appeared behind them, her face pale, eyes full of questions she wasn't yet allowed to ask. "Where will it go now?" William placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "Somewhere safe. Until we understand everything." A silence followed, longer, deeper, full of meaning, because what left the palace wasn't a diplomat, or a document, or a royal heirloom. It was something that could change the royal family's story entirely, and the world had no idea it had just moved past them in the dawn's first light. Buckingham Palace had always been a place where whispers traveled faster than footsteps. Even the thick carpets, the towering portraits, the gold-framed doors, none of them could quiet the tension that spread that morning. The dawn departure had already cast a shadow across the palace, and everyone inside seemed to feel it, even if they didn't know why. Just minutes after the mysterious vehicle disappeared down the mall, the corridors filled with a kind of soft electricity. Staff members passed each other with polite nods, but their eyes lingered, searching for answers. Royal guards, usually as steady as the marble floors beneath them, exchanged brief glances that said far more than any words. In the private wing, William paced slowly, hands on his hips, his face pulled tight with the weight of decision that still didn't feel real. The silence of the hall pressed in around him. Every few steps he paused, as if waiting for someone to come and say the entire morning had been a misunderstanding. Kate approached quietly, her soft slippers barely making a sound against the polished wood. "You look like you haven't taken a breath since 4 o'clock, she said gently. He exhaled, long and tense. "I keep thinking this shouldn't feel so monumental, but it does." "Because it is," Kate replied, stepping closer. "You know it." William rubbed his forehead, closing his eyes for a moment. The timing, the secrecy, the way the palace reacted, it all feels like something we can't fully control. Kate looked toward the tall window at the end of the hall. Outside, the sunrise had taken full hold, spreading a warm orange glow across the palace's stone exterior. It should have been a peaceful sight, but today it only made the contrast sharper. "It's not just about control," she said softly. "It's about the consequences." Before William could answer, a senior aide hurried down the hall, bowing his head quickly. "Your Royal Highness," he said breathlessly. "His Majesty is requesting you in the briefing room." William nodded. "Thank you." As the aide walked away, Kate touched William's hand. "Go," she whispered. "And please, tell me what you can, even a little." He managed a faint smile. "I promise." In the briefing room, King Charles was already seated, a file open in front of him. His glasses rested low on his nose, and though he tried to keep his posture firm, William could see the fatigue in his father's shoulders. Whatever the situation was, it was pressing hard on him. The room felt colder than usual, more serious. The air held the sense that something irreversible had begun. "You saw the departure?" Charles asked without looking up. "Yes," William replied. "And the reaction from the staff? It's spreading." Charles closed the folder carefully, almost reluctantly, as though the words inside were too heavy to shut away. "We knew it would." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the soft ticking of the antique clock on the wall dared to move. Finally, William broke the silence. "We need to discuss the implications." Charles leaned back slightly, his jaw tightening. "The implications," he repeated quietly. "That's exactly what keeps me awake." He paused. "That, and the fact that we are already behind events we didn't anticipate." William sat down across from him. "We have to stay ahead of the narrative. If this becomes public before we're prepared—" "It won't," Charles cut in sharply. Then his tone softened. "Not yet." The firmness in his father's voice made William realize something. Charles wasn't just worried. He was afraid. Not panic, not chaos, but a deep, controlled fear reserved only for matters that truly shook the foundations. "What happens next?" William asked. Charles sighed through his nose, folding his hands on the table. "We don't release anything. Not to the press. Not even to most of the senior staff. Not until we have clarity." William nodded slowly. "And the guard? They've already been given a level of confidentiality I've never authorized before." Charles gave a thin, strained smile. "If anyone can keep a secret, it's the men who stand out there in the cold for hours without blinking." William's expression held worry, but also admiration. They reacted as though they knew more than the public ever will. They reacted, Charles said heavily, like men who understand the gravity of what they're protecting. A knock on the door interrupted them. "Enter," Charles called. A security advisor stepped in, holding a tablet. "Your Majesty, we confirm the transport has reached the secure facility." Charles nodded once. "And the condition?" The advisor hesitated just long enough to raise tension. "Stable. For now." For now. The words hung in the air like a subtle warning. Charles dismissed the advisor, then looked at his son. "We're walking into an era where every decision we make, every word we release, will be analyzed under a microscope. And yet," he paused, "none of that pressure compares to what's at stake in this moment." William didn't respond right away. He simply absorbed the weight of his father's voice. "We'll handle it," he finally said. "Whatever comes." But Charles didn't answer. He was staring out the window again, toward the gates where the vehicle had disappeared. Meanwhile, in the staff corridors, tension simmered in quiet pockets. Two butlers, walking toward the main kitchen, whispered in low voices. "Did you see which gate they used?" "The east one. That never opens at this hour." "And those guards, I've never seen them look so rigid." I heard someone in security mention a special clearance file. A file for what? No idea, but something big. A young housemaid overheard them and paused mid-step, her hand hovering over a tray. She pretended to adjust a vase so she could listen more closely. Further down the hall, two senior advisors stood near a side doorway, leaning in close. "Do you think this relates to the reports?" "It must. But why now?" "Because they finally ran out of time." Their voices were hushed, careful. Everyone inside these walls understood what silence meant in the monarchy. Not ignorance, but protection. And the more the whispers grew, the more the mystery tightened around the palace like a cloak. Back upstairs, Kate walked into her sitting room and sat by the window, her mind filled with unanswered questions. Her heart ached with the instinctive sense that something fragile was now in danger, and that the royal family was bracing for impact. She whispered to herself, whatever that vehicle carried, It must be more important than anyone realizes. She looked out at the guards standing in their perfect formation. Today, their stillness looked different, almost strained. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her robe. Something was coming. She could feel it, and she wasn't sure the palace was ready. By midday, the sun was high. The streets around the palace were waking, and the world still had no idea that the royal family had just taken a step that could rewrite everything. Inside, the whispers had grown. The tension settled deeper, and the question no one dared speak out loud sat in the air. What exactly was inside that vehicle? Whatever the answer was, it wouldn't stay hidden forever. The secure facility was an hour outside London, hidden behind layers of woodland and private land owned quietly by the crown. Most people who passed by never realized anything significant lay beyond the fences. But this morning, the area was humming with a tension that didn't match its usually silent atmosphere. The matte black vehicle eased through the final checkpoint, escorted by 2 security teams who had been woken long before dawn. The guard at the gate scanned the passcode, then stepped back quickly, almost reverently, as the barrier lifted. Inside the facility, the temperature was cool, the lights bright, the security protocol stricter than anything used at Buckingham Palace. Only a handful of people had clearance to be here, and each one was handpicked for loyalty above all else. As the vehicle rolled to a stop, Dr. Evelyn Rathmore approached with a clipboard pressed tightly to her chest. Her white coat was crisp and her expression unreadable, but her eyes revealed she'd been waiting all night. She looked to the officer exiting the vehicle. "Is it safe to proceed?" The officer nodded. "Stable condition." "Good," she murmured. "Let's get inside before the environment changes." Inside. Environment changes. Words chosen carefully, but heavy with implication. 2 guards opened the back door of the vehicle, and a soft hiss of controlled air escaped. A small pod, no larger than a cradle, rested inside. Metallic, sterile, protected by temperature insulation and shock support. The pod hummed quietly, a faint pulse of light glowing from its center. Dr. Rathmore swallowed. "Bring it in carefully." The guards lifted the pod with slow, coordinated movements, carrying it down a sterile corridor lined with reinforced glass panels. The lights above flickered, as if sensing the gravity of what was being transported. When they reached the sealed room at the end, Rathmore scanned her fingerprint, then her iris. Authorization, Rathmore Evelyn. Level 7. Level 7. There were only 3 levels above that, and those were reserved for matters of national crisis. The door slid open. Inside, the room was stark, bright, and almost painfully quiet. A single observation table stood in the center. "Place it here," she instructed. As the pod settled on the table, Rathmore exhaled slowly. She reached forward, her hand hovering just above the latch. "Record begins," she said, her voice steady but carrying a tremor beneath. "Time, 7:18. Item received from Buckingham Palace." Item, a word chosen not to reveal too much in case a recording was ever leaked. But she knew, and the guards knew, it wasn't just an item. She pressed the latch. The pod opened with a soft, hydraulic sigh. A light rose from within, shimmering for a moment before settling. And then, finally, the truth revealed itself. Inside lay a child, a very small child, wrapped in a delicate blanket. Eyes closed, a faint, fragile breath rising and falling against the fabric. The guard stiffened. One of them took an involuntary step closer, then corrected himself. Another guard blinked, struggling to keep his composure. The child's presence in that pod felt almost unreal. How could someone so tiny require such secrecy, such protection, such a dramatic midnight extraction? Rathmore leaned forward, adjusting the sensors attached to the blanket, vitals holding steady. No unexpected fluctuations. Her voice softened. "You gave everyone quite a night, little one." She pulled back the blanket slightly, revealing the child's face. A shock of soft hair, unmistakable features, a mix of vulnerability and lineage. A lineage anyone in Britain would recognize in an instant. The child wasn't just any child. It was a royal child, a child whose existence had not been announced, acknowledged, or even hinted at by the palace. A child the world did not know existed. One guard finally found his voice. "Ma'am, is that—" "Do not speak the name," Rathmore said quickly, almost sharply. "Until the palace give confirmation, no one speaks a name." The guard nodded, swallowing hard. She looked down again at the small face. Peaceful, innocent, completely unaware that the weight of an entire nation now rested on their tiny shoulders. Back at Buckingham Palace, a storm of questions had filled the private quarters. Kate sat with her hands clasped tightly, waiting for William to return from the briefing room. The moment he stepped in, she rose, her breath catching. "Please," she said, "tell me what you can." William closed the door behind him. His face didn't hold panic, but it carried a heavy, complicated sadness. "It was a child," he said softly. Kate froze. "A child? Whose?" William's gaze softened. "Someone who needs protection. Someone who didn't ask to be born into this." Kate took a step closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Is it family?" William hesitated, a hesitation that confirmed everything without saying a word. Kate's heart tightened. "Oh my God!" She sank into a chair, pressing her hand to her mouth. The realization hit her with a force she wasn't prepared for. A secret child, hidden from the world, moved in the dead of dawn under heavy guard. "What happens now?" she whispered. William sat across from her, elbows on his knees, head bowed for a moment. "We don't know yet, but Father believes this could change the monarchy. Completely." Kate's eyes filled with worry. "And the press?" "They don't know. Not yet. But when they find out—" William shook his head. "This will become the biggest story the royal family has faced in decades." He reached for her hand. "We'll get through this. Together." But Kate stared at the window again, imagining the vehicle disappearing through the morning mist. "Whoever that child is," she murmured, "their existence will shake everything we thought we understood." Inside the secure facility, Dr. Rathmore was finishing her preliminary analysis when the child stirred. A tiny movement, a soft sound. She froze, then leaned down gently. "It's all right. You're safe." The child's eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes that glimmer with unmistakable heritage. Eyes seen in portraits, documentaries, and photographs across the world. Eyes that carried the unmistakable mark of a royal line. Rathmore whispered, almost to herself, "You're going to change everything." The child blinked once, then again, as if they somehow understood. And in Buckingham Palace, miles away, King Charles stood alone in his study, staring at an old portrait of the monarchy, his shoulders heavy, his heart torn between duty and humanity. He whispered to the empty room, "How do we protect a secret that the world will want to tear apart?" The answer did not come, but he knew one thing. The hidden cargo had set a storm into motion, and soon the world would feel the first winds of it. The news almost broke before the royal family was ready. By late afternoon, whispers inside Buckingham Palace had grown into vibrations. You could feel them in every corridor, every doorway, every room where someone paused, just for a moment, to wonder whether they were standing in the middle of a secret that would soon become a global storm. And storms did not wait politely. At exactly 3:42 p.m., a senior security officer approached King Charles with a strained expression. "Your Majesty, there has been an attempt to access the restricted files." Charles stiffened. "External?" "Internal," the officer replied quietly. "But we intercepted it." Charles closed his eyes. "Internal." That meant staff. That meant someone close enough to sense the tension. Someone who couldn't resist curiosity. Someone who felt a truth vibrating beneath the marble floors. But Charles didn't scold. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Increase encryption and double the confidentiality orders." The officer bowed. "Yes, sir." Charles returned to the window, staring again at the palace gates. The same gates through which the mysterious vehicle had slipped into the dawn. He'd been staring like that all day, as if the iron bars could offer answers he couldn't find inside himself. A soft knock came from behind. "Come in," he said. It was Camilla. She stepped inside quietly, her usual calmness softened by the concern in her eyes. She approached him slowly. "You've been standing there for hours." Charles gave a tired sigh. I'm thinking. I know. She touched his arm. But you cannot carry the entire weight alone. Charles looked at her, really looked, and the struggle in his expression eased just a little. Camilla continued, her voice gentle. This child, whatever the circumstances, is innocent, and if we treat the situation with compassion, the country will follow. Charles turned away, pacing. Compassion won't stop headlines. Compassion won't stop the speculation. The monarchy is already under more scrutiny than ever, and now this. Then lead with truth, she whispered. Charles froze. Truth, a word heavy enough to bend the crown itself. Down the hall, William and Kate walked together in silence. The kind of silence where both people were thinking 1,000 things but didn't know how to start saying any of them. Eventually, Kate spoke. Do you think the public will accept this? She asked quietly. William hesitated. I think if we handle this carefully with honesty and responsibility, they might. But if we don't... William didn't finish the sentence because the consequences didn't need describing. They both knew them. A monarchy built on tradition could not absorb unlimited shocks, especially shocks involving lineage, succession, and public trust. Kate paused near the grand staircase, gripping the railing for a moment. I keep thinking about the child, she said softly. Imagine growing up knowing that your very existence caused a national crisis. William stepped closer. We'll make sure they're protected. That's the one thing we can control. Kate nodded, but her worry didn't disappear. And Charles... William exhaled. Father is torn. He wants to protect the monarchy, but he also wants to protect the child. And he can't do both forever. William didn't answer. He didn't need to. Miles away, inside the secure facility, Dr. Evelyn Rathmore finished her final round of tests. The child lay sleeping again, breathing softly, unaware of the chaos unfolding far beyond the sterile, white walls. Rathmore stood over the tiny figure, hands clasped behind her back. You have no idea who you are, do you? She whispered. No idea what you carry. No idea what waits for you outside these doors. She touched the side of the pod gently, almost protectively. A notification pinged on her tablet. Authorization request, Buckingham Palace. She tapped the screen. In seconds, King Charles appeared on the secure video line. His face was lined with fatigue, but his voice held a steady resolve. Doctor, he said, how is the child? Stable, Rathmore replied. No complications. Strong vitals. Charles exhaled, long and heavy. Rathmore hesitated. Your Majesty, the time for decisions is approaching. I know, Charles said quietly, more quickly than expected. He looked down for a moment, then back up. Prepare the child for transport. Safely, I will come personally to the facility. Rathmore blinked in surprise. Your Majesty, you don't need... I do, Charles interrupted gently. Some responsibilities cannot be delegated. The screen went dark. Rathmore stood still for a long moment. The king was coming, not as a monarch, but as a man who needed to face the truth with his own eyes. At Buckingham Palace, preparations unfolded with careful precision. William stood near the courtyard, waiting for the car that would take Charles to the secure facility. Are you certain about this? William asked. Charles nodded. If I am to make a decision that shapes the future, I need to look into the child's eyes myself. William swallowed. You think seeing them will make the choice easier? No, Charles said softly, but it will make it honest. The car pulled up. Charles paused before entering, turning to William with a look that carried decades of responsibility. When the public learns the truth, Charles said, they must see that we acted not out of fear but with dignity. William nodded slowly. And what exactly is the truth, Father? Charles's jaw tightened. The truth, he said, is that this child did not ask to be born, and yet their presence may define us all. Then he stepped into the car, and the door closed. At the facility, Charles entered the sterilized room with a pace he rarely used. Slow, deliberate, almost reverent. The guard stepped aside. Rathmore straightened. The pod sat in the center of the room, small, glowing gently. The child slept peacefully. Charles approached, and for the first time that day, the weight lifted just slightly. He stared down at the tiny face, the familiar features, the unmistakable lineage. His throat tightened. A future he had not expected. A responsibility he could not have predicted. A child whose existence would demand truth, courage, and a rewriting of history. He reached out with trembling fingers and brushed the edge of the blanket. So small, he whispered, and yet so powerful. Rathmore watched quietly, understanding that this moment was larger than position, larger than bloodline, larger than legacy. It was human, very human. Charles straightened, his decision settling into his bones. "Doctor," he said softly, "prepare everything." Rathmore blinked. "Everything for what, Your Majesty?" Charles turned to her, eyes clear. "For the announcement." Later that night, back at Buckingham Palace, William and Kate waited in the king's private office. Charles entered slowly, but with a steadiness that hadn't been there earlier. "It's time," he said simply. Kate felt her breath hitch. William stood taller. Charles continued, "We will tell the truth. We will protect the child. And we will face whatever comes." William nodded. "Together?" Charles smiled faintly. "Together?" The palace clock chimed softly behind them. And with that, the storm that began before dawn found its direction. A new chapter in royal history had begun, not with ceremony, not with speeches, but with honesty, and with a child whose arrival would change everything, forever.